Welcome to Freedom Journey's Sacred Places. Freedom Journeys is Word Radio's year-long storytelling initiative commemorating the 250th anniversary of the United States. We're celebrating 250 phenomenal Philadelphians whose stories have too often been overlooked or untold, and whose lives and legacies continue to shape our city, our country, and our world. As part of that initiative, Freedom Journeys, Sacred Places, produced and presented by Solomon Jones, explores the places where Black history happened and highlights the people working today to preserve these remarkable sites and the stories they hold. This series is made possible in part through the support of our community impact sponsor, the Preservation Alliance for Greater Philadelphia. And now, here's Solomon Jones.
The journey of Black people in America has been one of trials and triumphs, a journey where faith was always there. Maybe that's why the Black church is such a sacred place. It is the place where, in spite of everything, we overcome. Through the lens of Negro spirituals rooted in African rhythms, through sermons and testimonies that speak to liberation, Black churches like New River Presbyterian and Mother Bethel AME and Tindley Temple United Methodist, these churches chronicle the lives of the people who built them, people like Charles Albert Tindley.
The road to freedom was a hard one. His family was split up through the horrible treatment of slavery. He made the leap of freedom from Maryland to the state of Pennsylvania and into Philadelphia. Now, I must say, as a 9-year-old, you can imagine the fright, the terror that he felt leaving his birth home as a slave on that plantation farmland to try to make it to a better day and landing in Philadelphia doing so. And it's really amazing because carrying his father's hope and dream for freedom with the faith that he instilled in him is what he said carried him and made the difference at such a tiny young age to try to get to freedom.
That's Jillian Pirtle, historian and archivist for the Tindley Temple United Methodist Church. As the Charles A. Tindley Legacy Preservation Center takes shape at the historic church on South Broad Street, Pirtle is among those maintaining the documents and artifacts that recount Tindley's incredible drive to overcome, beginning with his ability to survive alone in Philadelphia as a child. I asked her how he did it.
So in Philadelphia, you had a thriving free Black community. Did he interact with the free Black community here in order to make it?
Indeed, he did. So in the 7th Ward, he found a home and a hub for free Black society, in which as a child, he was able to cocoon himself.
He found work using the skills he'd learned on the Maryland plantation, skills like masonry and janitorial work. He eventually became a sexton at East Calvary Methodist Church, a mixed congregation which later branched off into Bainbridge Street Methodist Episcopal Church, a church that grew as Blacks continued to migrate north during the Great Migration. It was there at Bainbridge that Tindley began teaching himself the Bible by candlelight at night. Jillian Pirtle takes the story from there.
The deacons of the church and the laymen saw, and they applauded his efforts. They decided that they were going to send him away to Boston so that he could learn and get a serious heft in education and ministry, and then bring him back. And then when he returned, he told the deacons that the Lord touched him for the call. He found the call to ministry while he was away studying and learning. And they would send him, once he got licensed, from Delaware back to Maryland, where he came from within slavery, and now free, a free man going back to where he started. And then finally, he landed where he wanted to be, which was at Bainbridge Street United Methodist Church, called for that moment, for the church, for the pastorate, for the people of the time.
But Tindley's life, while unique, is not the only one that reflects the role of faith in our journey to freedom. Richard Allen, founder of Mother Bethel AME Church, was born nearly 100 years before Tindley, yet his story shares remarkable similarities. Here's Reverend Carolyn Cavaness, senior pastor of Mother Bethel AME. When I think about his story and I think about Richard Allen, both of them had their roots in slavery. Richard Allen had been enslaved. Charles Albert Tindley had one parent enslaved, one parent free. How do you think that shaped both Tindley and Allen?
So, one is certainly when we think about the conversion experience of Bishop Allen and how he records in his life and labors that my dungeon shook and my chains were set free. And certainly from, to salvation, right, being free from sin, but that informing that also meant that he could be free from being enslaved. And so this notion of freedom, this notion of breaking through and past a system, a structure that seeks to, bind you, place you in bondage, and also revering you less than. And so that is, to me, also the essence of the gospel message. That yes, that it certainly in the uplift, that we can be free from sin and how we are born into it and iniquity, but also that it also takes shape in our larger, if you will, ways in which that we think about ourselves and move in the world. That's what stands out to me and when I think about both of their stories.
As for Richard Allen, his story begins in the 1700s when his family was enslaved by a wealthy Philadelphia family called the Chews. But Allen's mindset was one of liberation. So when he was sold to a much less prominent man called Stokely Sturgis, his faith gave him the boldness to act. Here's Reverend Mark Kelly Tyler, historiographer and director of research and scholarship of the AME Church.
Stokely Sturgis was not, a great businessman. So imagine the family goes from a wealthy family to one that's just struggling and scraping to get by. So Allen is down near Dover, enslaved, when he is converted. So even though he's enslaved, he recognizes he also has his own soul to deal with. And he hears a white Methodist preacher who is going through Delaware, preaching to anybody who will listen, black, white, enslaved, free, it doesn't matter. So check this, Solomon. He is so shrewd, Allen is. He starts to show early on. He believes that if he can get his owner, Stokely Sturgis, to hear this preacher, Freeborn Garretson, that was his name, that he too will be saved and will more likely be willing to sell Allen his freedom. The entire plan works. Allen, gets him convicted because this guy was hard on slave owners in his preaching, terrifies Stokely Sturgis, makes arrangements, and Allen hauls salt for the Continental Army, the Revolutionary Army, during the Revolutionary War in his extra time and earns enough money to become free. And so he gets his freedom and then joins the Methodist Church because that's where he first experienced God. And in the earliest days, the Methodist Church, what is now considered the UMC, was so anti-slavery because of their founder, John Wesley, that in their first book of laws, it said if you own slaves, that you cannot be in good standing in the church. And that's why Allen wanted to become a Methodist, even though the American Methodists turned their backs on that commitment by and large. But he understood that it was always supposed to be a freedom church.
Like the man who led him to Christianity, Allen became a traveling preacher. It was a hard life.
He's not ordained or licensed yet at this point, but he just becomes like this traveling, walking evangelist, eventually getting a horse of his own, but the horse is kind of small. So he trades his horse for a blind horse, but it's bigger and stronger and can go farther, right? So Allen he preaches on the main line. There's a great story where he goes to Ardmore and Radnor in that area. He walks so long that his feet are so blistered when he gets there. A black family called the Waters family tends to him. They lift this heavy table to bring the food to him. So he doesn't have to get up to walk anymore. And he ministers to folk out there.
Eventually, Allen was invited to preach at St. George's Methodist Church, but the invitation came with a catch. Reverend Tyler explains.
He's allowed to preach at 5 a.m., that glorious hour where everybody wants to come to church. That's the throwaway hour, Solomon. That's when they tell you, we want you, but we really don't want you. Yeah, we got a great service at 5, but he blows the service up.
But even in the Methodist Church, which was founded on an anti-slavery platform, racism was ever present. And as the number of black worshipers grew, so did the animosity. Brian Armstead, a member and tour guide at Mother Bethel, picks up the story from there.
The church was growing so much that they had to build a balcony. But unfortunately, as we all know, too many times in our history, some black people is good. Too many black people is a problem. And so they started making a policy in the church that the blacks had to all go worship up in the balcony. Again, think 60s, had to be in the back of the bus, right? You had to be up in the balcony. So at one particular point, Allen and Jones were in prayer with other black people at the altar. And the trustee came by and said, okay, y'all got to go get up and go back to the balcony. And Jones says basically, you know what, give us this moment and we will trouble you no more. They finished praying, and then Allen and Jones got up, and the black congregation followed them, and they walked out, the first act of civil disobedience in this country. And they walked out, and they troubled that church no more. They said, we're out, we're going to start our own thing. And so Reverend Allen ends up starting Bethel Church, which later becomes Mother Bethel, because it's the mother of the AME denomination.
The church's first building was in a blacksmith shop, but it was a growing congregation, and Allen, along with Absalom Jones, founder of St. Thomas African Episcopal Church, were leaders of two large black congregations. So when the yellow fever epidemic struck Philadelphia, Allen and Jones were asked to help, and they did, but their assistance was met with slander.
After a while, the epidemic passes, people start returning back to Philadelphia. And there was one publisher in particular named Matthew Carey who wrote a publication detailing what happened during the calamity. But he slandered Allen and Jones in the black community and said that we have been profiteering and stealing from people and that whole thing, right? So Allen and Jones wrote this book, and this is actually the first book copyrighted by black people in this country. And I think it's significant. Our first book that we had copyrighted was not a love book, was not a book of fiction, was not a book of poetry. It was a book to defend themselves against these unwarranted attacks. And they did it so well. They documented stories of what people did, and they had bookkeeping that's inside. They did it so well that it gave cover to people like the mayor of Philadelphia to come out and say that in 1793 that black people had actually come and saved the city of Philadelphia.
Richard Allen not only saved Philadelphia in its darkest moment, he led the effort that purchased the longest continuously owned piece of black property in America. A century later, Charles Albert Tindley took the black church to another level with music that spoke to the souls of his people and still speaks today. Here's Jillian Pirtle.
Reverend Tindley said that as a child, he felt melody in his heart. When he heard what we would now know today as the American Negro spiritual, when he was in the fields of Maryland, working with the other slaves and hearing them sing and break out into harmonies, he said he kept the melodies in his heart and in his spirit. Mm-hmm. When they would have church meeting, he said, on Sundays, and they would sing the Anglican hymns, he would hold that and the words in his heart. And as he grew and developed, the writing, the poetry, the lyric came even before the melody on the organ and piano when he sat down. And so you would say it was very innate. It wasn't Reverend Tindley going to music school to learn how. The music came from within. People at their deepest, darkest moments in their life cling to by and by. When the morning comes, when you're getting ready to hold your mother's hand for the last time, when all the saints are come together and home, we'll tell the story of how we overcome, and we'll understand it better by and by. That's going to stay with us until the Lord comes back, until Jesus calls our name. But he gave that to us. Mm-hmm. These are our Bible musically.
But Tindley's rise from slavery to leading what some consider America's first megachurch was about much more than music. It was about his ability to overcome and to influence the lives of the pastors who followed him. Here's Reverend Carolyn Cavaness.
So my father, the late Reverend Harold Cavaness, was in addition to being a preacher, he was a renowned singer in Newark, New Jersey, our home. And I recall as a child, there was a play on Reverend Tindley, and he had the star role. And I remember going to a few of the performances and hearing the music, We Shall Overcome, hearing the music, what is this? I think we'll understand it better by and by.
Mm-hmm.
So just the music, but also, and I think he perhaps presents to us the Black preacher also being a singer, right? So how these two worlds of preaching and singing, how they converge. And also being at the forefront of leading a very strong and impactful religious community known today as Tindley Temple.
But Tindley's influence didn't stop there. In fact, his influence helped to drive a movement. Here's Jillian Pirtle.
Reverend Thomas A. Dorsey happened to come to one of Reverend Tindley's services in Philadelphia. He was so inspired by Reverend Tindley's I'll Overcome Someday. He played it on the piano here in Philadelphia for Mahalia Jackson. Mahalia Jackson then in turn took that song and she sang it at a church service for Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King on a Thursday evening when he was feeling rather low and didn't think he had the energy and the strength to press on to speak to a people who were being oppressed horribly during a civil rights movement. And she stood up and she began to sing, "We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Deep in my heart, I do believe." That became the clarion call and the anthem for the civil rights movement. We shall overcome. Never would have happened without Reverend Tindley.
Still, the influence of Tindley goes well beyond music. In 1915, when racism struck particularly close to home, Tindley risked everything to stand up. Here's Jillian Pirtle.
A wonderful thing that he did was form a friendship and an alliance with historical figure John Wanamaker. And John Wanamaker did a lot to help Reverend Tindley during a time of great suffering in America and transitioning for the people. And it would last a very long friendship until a strain was put on it with the releasing of the film Birth of a Nation. Because Reverend Tindley had become a very historic Black leader in Philadelphia. And so, of course, with the release of that horrible racist film, he had to say something. He had to lead a protest and a revolt. And that is where John Wanamaker felt that he didn't want him to risk a lot of his capital as a leader on this one film. But he stood up for his people. He could not stand in the pulpit on Sunday and look at the saints and say that he did not stand up for what was right, and he didn't stand up for those that God created.
And Tindley never stopped standing up. He created classes on literacy and finance, a Bible institute and community kitchen. He created a church that served the people, and that's just the beginning of a history that continues in our most sacred places. With a new space for archival display at Tindley Temple, with a wellness clinic at New River Presbyterian, with Mother Bethel still standing as a shining example of Black achievement. And in all these sacred places, when we honor Black history, in the words of Charles Tindley, we've overcome. I'm Solomon Jones, and this is Freedom Journeys, Sacred Places on WURD.
You've been listening to Freedom Journeys, Sacred Places. This series is made possible through the generous support of our community impact sponsor, the Preservation Alliance for Greater Philadelphia. We also thank our community partners for helping connect these stories with audiences throughout our region. The Brewerytown Sharswood Neighborhood Coalition, Pequessing Trail of History, Byberry Friends Meeting, the Society for the Preservation of Philadelphia African American Assets, and the Fund for Sacred Places. Freedom Journeys is made possible through the support of the Office of Senator Vincent Hughes, State Representative Jordan A. Harris, Chairman of the Pennsylvania House Appropriations Committee and the Pennsylvania Department of Commerce and Economic Development, the Philadelphia Funder Collaborative for the Semi-Quincentennial, Comcast, PICO, the Philadelphia Parking Authority, Independence Blue Cross, and the Office of Philadelphia City Council Member Cindy Bass. To learn more, visit wordradio.com/freedomjourneys. Thanks for listening.